If you clicked on this video, you're probably trying to understand the full story of the Umbrella Corporation, how a simple pharmaceutical company became responsible for the most destructive bioweapons in the Resident Evil universe. And you're in the right place, because we're starting this timeline from the very beginning, long before the Spencer Mansion, long before Raccoon City, and long before anyone had ever heard the word T-Virus. What most people don't realize is that Umbrella's story doesn't begin in a lab or in a boardroom. It actually starts deep in Africa, with an ancient flower that quietly shaped the fate of every character and every outbreak that would follow. And one small decision made there, decades before the games take place, set off a chain reaction that the world never recovered from. Across this video, we're going to break down Umbrella's entire history in order, piece by piece, so you can finally see how everything connects. The founders, the viruses, the experiments, the betrayals, and the cover-ups that led to one of the worst disasters in video game history. So get comfortable, settle in, and let's start at the very beginning of the Umbrella Corporation timeline. If you like deep, calm, lore videos, feel free to subscribe. It really helps me keep creating these for you. Part 1. The Progenitor Flower. Discovery in Africa. The ultimate, horrifying lineage of the Umbrella Corporation, a company that would one day plunge the world into a state of perpetual biological terror, traces its noxious roots back not to the polished laboratories of North America or Europe, but to the dense, equatorial rainforests of West Africa in the mid-20th century. Specifically, the genesis of the catastrophe that created the T virus, the G virus, and every subsequent bioorganic weapon rests in the accidental discovery of a rare, ancient flower. The year was approximately 1950, when three men who would become the co-founders of the corporation, Oswell Spencer, Edward Ashford, and James Marcus, first received word of the flower's existence and its profound, world-altering capabilities. Their shared obsession with genetic enhancement and the concept of a new, genetically superior human race, known as the Übermensch, led them to fund extensive expeditions, all centered on finding the source of this biological marvel. The source was eventually tracked to a secluded area in the jungle, protected and revered by the local Ndipaya tribe. This tribe had cultivated a sacred space known as the Sun Garden, where the unique phosphorescent flower grew in abundance. The flower itself was named the Stairway of the Sun, a name that reflected the reverence and terror with which the local people viewed it. For the three European scientists, the flower was an anthropological curiosity that rapidly became a scientific fixation. The plant's true biological significance was quickly revealed. It housed a natural, ancient retrovirus that had evolved over millennia in symbiosis with the flora, the progenitor virus. This virus was the raw, primordial source of all the genetic mutation that would later destroy Raccoon City and nearly wipe out humanity. The Ndipaya people had long incorporated the flower into a sacred, horrific ritual. To claim leadership, a member of the tribe would be required to consume the flower. The ritual was brutally simple and intensely selective. The virus was almost universally fatal to human hosts, killing the vast majority of those who attempted to consume it. However, the rare survivors of this intense viral exposure gained something extraordinary and terrifying. Their bodies would undergo a massive, forced evolutionary leap, granting them superhuman abilities, including immense physical strength, heightened reflexes, and a vastly extended lifespan. These survivors were immediately revered as god kings who ruled the tribe for centuries. Their extended reign lending an unparalleled level of stability and scientific knowledge to the isolated community. Furthermore, these god kings were noted as master engineers, proving that the virus not only conferred physical strength, but also cognitive and technological advantages, directly achieving the founder's Übermensch ideal. It was this profound, undeniable proof of forced, controlled human evolution that convinced Spencer, Ashford, and Marcus that they had found the key to achieving their ultimate ideological goal. The progenitor virus was not just a medical discovery, it was a philosophical weapon. The founders immediately recognized the flower's massive potential to create a genetically superior race, and they quickly initiated a concerted effort to exploit the Undipire's garden. The culmination of their planning was the official launch of a large-scale expedition in 1966 to West Africa. The purpose of this massive, well-funded venture was not to study the Undipire people or their culture, but to retrieve extensive samples of the progenitor flower, establish control over the sun garden, and transport the rare, virus-carrying flora back to European and American labs for intensive, secretive study. The discovery of the progenitor virus in the stairway of the sunflower, therefore, is the genuine beginning of the corporate evil. It marks the moment when a secret, ancient power intended for local ritual became the focus of a modern, ambitious eugenics movement. The virus itself, unstable and highly lethal, was the genetic blueprint. The Undipire ritual provided the proof of concept that a surviving host could be granted superior genetic traits. This African discovery established the absolute foundation upon which the future Umbrella Corporation would be built. A pharmaceutical front dedicated to harnessing this primordial biological power, first for their own misguided evolutionary goals, and later for the creation of devastating bioorganic weapons that would generate the immense profit necessary to fund their long-term, sinister vision. The journey from a flower in a remote jungle garden to the global bioweapon market was now officially underway. Part 2. Mother Miranda and Spencer's Ideological Awakening. To truly understand the ultimate goal and ideology of Oswell E. Spencer, the true mastermind and visionary behind the Umbrella Corporation, one must look beyond the initial discovery of the progenitor virus in Africa and turn instead to an earlier, more esoteric connection. His mentorship under a deeply powerful and ancient figure known only as Mother Miranda. Lore introduced in later installments of the game series, specifically in Resident Evil Village, reveals this crucial, foundational link, establishing that Spencer's philosophical journey toward forced human evolution began not in a sterile laboratory, but in an isolated, mysterious Eastern European village steeped in occult tradition and ancient biological horror. Spencer was, in his youth, a highly ambitious and intelligent student, but his ideology was ultimately shaped and radicalized by his experience under Mother Miranda. Miranda was not merely a village elder, she was a woman consumed by grief and driven to achieve immortality and resurrection through biological means. Her personal tragedy occurred in 1919, when her young daughter, Ava, succumbed to the global pandemic of the Spanish flu. Devastated and unable to cope with the loss, Miranda retreated into the local cave system, where she discovered a massive, ancient fungal supercolony. This unique biological organism, which she eventually dubbed the mold, was intrinsically connected to the region's geological and biological history, and it possessed its own powerful, mutagenic properties that rivaled those of the African progenitor flower. Miranda's subsequent infection by the mold granted her vast, unprecedented knowledge, extended her lifespan far beyond normal human limits, and conferred upon her frightening shape-shifting powers effectively turning her into an immortal biological entity. Consumed by the goal of resurrecting her dead daughter, Miranda began conducting horrific, systematic experiments on the local villagers. Her goal was to find the perfect human host into which she could transfer the consciousness and spirit of her deceased daughter. This process of experimentation, which often involved infecting and grotesquely mutating her unsuspecting test subjects, was driven by a core philosophy that humanity's natural evolution was too slow and flawed, and that true progress, or in her case, resurrection, required forced biological mutation and the culling of the genetically weak. Oswell Spencer became a student of this woman and her philosophy. He witnessed Miranda's power, studied her methods, and internalized her concept of survival of the fittest, achieved through biological trauma. Spencer recognized the parallels between Miranda's mold and the theoretical potential of his own eugenics research. He adopted Miranda's core belief system, the radical doctrine of forced human evolution and eugenics, believing that only a genetically engineered elite should inherit the new world. This philosophical awakening under Miranda was the crucial precursor to the entire Umbrella Corporation project, providing the why behind the eventual global bioterrorism. Furthermore, the influence of Mother Miranda extended beyond mere philosophy and into the corporation's iconography. Deep within the cave system of the Eastern European village, Spencer discovered ancient symbols and carvings, including a circular motif that strongly resembled an umbrella or a parasol, which was likely associated with the protection and power of the mold super colony. Inspired by this powerful, esoteric image, Spencer made the deliberate decision to adopt the umbrella symbol for his future pharmaceutical company. This detail links the modern, technological corporation directly back to an ancient, supernatural biological entity and its twisted, grieving matriarch. The symbol is not a reference to weather protection. It is a reference to a godlike, ancient power found in a cave. Spencer's years spent under the ideological influence of Mother Miranda provided him not just with a goal, but with the necessary megalomania and moral detachment required to create a secret society dedicated to achieving a new world order through global biological warfare and genetic manipulation, all in pursuit of an ideal that began with a mother's devastating grief. Part 3. The Three Founders: Spencer, Marcus, and Ashford. The formation of the Umbrella Corporation was the result of a profound and ultimately deadly convergence of three distinct scientific minds, united by a shared obsession with the dark concept of eugenics and the forceful achievement of a superhuman ideal. These three men, Oswell Spencer, James Marcus, and Edward Ashford, were not merely partners. They were participants in an esoteric European eugenics circle who had spent years theorizing about how a mutagenic virus, if properly engineered, could finally create the Übermensch, or genetically superior human, a philosophical obsession dating back to the early 20th century. The discovery of the progenitor virus in the African stairway of the sunflower provided them with the tangible means to transition their lofty, evil theories into a terrifying, practical reality. Before the corporation's official founding, the three men were engaged in the intensive, secretive study of the newly retrieved African flowers in the mid-1960s. Their initial research quickly confirmed both the immense power and the crippling instability of the progenitor virus. The core scientific problem they immediately encountered was the high degree of lethality. While the virus offered the potential for profound genetic uplift in the rare survivor, it was almost universally fatal to human hosts. The vast majority of those exposed, whether willingly or through experimentation, simply died quickly and painfully. a biological brick wall that prevented any mass application of the virus, to transition from rare, anecdotal survival to a reliable, controlled genetic engineering program. They realized they needed a monumental commitment of resources. The solution to this immense technical problem was purely financial and logistical. The three founders realized they required immense, perpetual funding that could only be generated through a massive, globally successful corporate entity. They needed a vehicle that could operate with complete secrecy, shield them from scrutiny, and provide them with the endless capital required to continue their dangerous, illegal experiments on an industrial scale. This necessary logistical step revealed the distinct and ultimately fatal imbalance in the personalities and motivations of the three founders. An imbalance that would eventually lead to betrayals and assassinations. Dr. James Marcus was perhaps the most single-minded of the three. He was the brilliant scientist, the visionary of biological manipulation, and his motivation was purely academic and scientific. He was fascinated by the raw power of the progenitor virus and was primarily interested in the intellectual challenge of stabilizing its lethal qualities. Marcus was an indifferent partner in the corporate sense. He had little interest in the financial or political manipulation required to run a global conglomerate. His focus was always on the lab, the petri dish, and the next evolutionary breakthrough, making him a powerful scientific asset but a vulnerable political player. Edward Ashford, the third founder, came from a line of highly ambitious, noble European scientists and was concerned with the legacy and prestige of his family name, a motivation that would later be tragically mirrored by his son, Alexander. Edward was a necessary financier, an intellectual contributor in the early years, but his early death in a suspicious lab accident in 1968 eliminated him from the core, ongoing narrative almost immediately after the company's official founding, leaving the true power struggle to unfold between the remaining two. Oswell Spencer, however, was the mastermind, the true architect of the entire corporate structure. Spencer was the political operator, the strategist, and the one whose ideology was most deeply rooted in Mother Miranda's terrifying philosophy of eugenics. He conceived the brilliant, sinister plan to create an elaborate pharmaceutical front company. This company, dedicated publicly to preserving the health of the people, would serve as the perfect cover. It would generate massive, legitimate profits through conventional medicine and cosmetics, while secretly channeling those funds directly into their clandestine, increasingly brutal bioweapons research. Spencer's vision transformed their theoretical eugenics circle into a genuine, functional global power structure, making him the supreme, unchallenged leader of the newly formed umbrella corporation, a position he would hold until his final, inevitable downfall many decades later. Part 4. The official founding of Umbrella, 1968. With the necessary resources secured and the ideological goals firmly aligned, the Umbrella Corporation officially transitioned from a secret society of ambitious eugenics theorists into a legitimate, public, global enterprise. The official founding date is recorded as April 1968, a monumental event that masked a catastrophic, century-spanning ambition. The immediate success and rapid global expansion of the corporation was due entirely to the masterful deception orchestrated by Oswell Spencer, who meticulously designed every public facet of the company to obscure its true, horrifying purpose. The public image of the newly established Umbrella Corporation was crafted to be one of unimpeachable legitimacy, innovation, and humanitarian concern. It was a pharmaceutical company dedicated to the development of cutting-edge medicine, cosmetics, and health products. The company motto, a profound piece of corporate irony, was preserving the health of the people. This public-facing identity was the ultimate cover for their true clandestine goal, which was the exact opposite: the research, development, and eventual mass production of lethal biological organic weapons, known universally as BOWs. The pharmaceutical profits were merely the lubricant and the funding source for their core, secret project, achieving Spencer's eugenics vision of forced human evolution through the progenitor virus and its subsequent viral strains. Umbrella's corporate structure reflected its global, dual-purpose nature. It rapidly expanded from its initial, unassuming Raccoon City offices in the United States, which served primarily as a staging ground for their secretive research facilities in the nearby Arklay Mountains. However, the main political and administrative headquarters for the global operation was quickly established in Berlin, Germany. This strategic choice allowed Spencer to maintain a base of operations at the center of the European eugenics movement that gave rise to his ideology, while using the vast, isolated territory of the United States for the practical, messy, and illegal research, experiments, and subsequent cover-ups required by their BOW program. The 1968 founding formalized a corporate hierarchy built not on conventional business principles, but on secrecy, ruthlessness, and absolute loyalty to Spencer's vision. The company's immense profits, generated by selling legitimate products like advanced medications and the highly popular cosmetic line derived from viral stabilizers, were secretly funneled into the black operations. These black operations included the acquisition of human test subjects, the construction of massive underground laboratories, and the employment of paramilitary forces such as the future Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, or UBCS, necessary for both protection and cleanup operations. The Umbrella Corporation, therefore, was founded on a colossal lie, a corporate facade that was nothing more than an elaborate financial engine designed to fund the founders' pathological desire to remake the world in their image. The legitimate pharmaceuticals were a front for the illicit bioweapons trade, and the immense profits from the weapons trade were intended to fund the ultimate eugenics project. The innocuous umbrella logo, which Spencer had adopted from the esoteric iconography of Mother Miranda's village cave system, became a chilling global symbol. It was a symbol not of shelter from the rain, but of a dark, all-encompassing conspiracy to control human evolution, a conspiracy that had now attained the financial and logistical power of a legitimate, publicly traded multinational corporation, setting the stage for the creation of the T-virus and the inevitable, devastating outbreaks that would follow in less than 3 decades. Part 5. Early Progenitor Virus Experiments, 1960s to the 1970s. Following the successful expedition to West Africa in 1966, the Umbrella Corporation immediately dedicated immense resources and secrecy to the study and weaponization of the progenitor virus. This period, spanning the late 1960s and the early 1970s, represents the initial, brutal phase of Umbrella's research, a time characterized by countless failures, immense lethality, and the establishment of the horrific groundwork for all future viral strains. The core of this black operation was centered in the newly created, highly secured lab facilities built deep within the rugged, isolated territory of the Arklay Mountains near Raccoon City. The initial technical challenge faced by the researchers was the difficulty of working with the raw viral source. The African stairway of the sunflowers were extremely rare and notoriously difficult to cultivate in controlled, temperate United States environments. The successful propagation of the flora required the creation of highly specialized, secluded laboratories with precisely regulated atmospheric conditions. a necessary but costly step that further reinforced the need for the pharmaceutical front company's enormous funding. Once the flowers were stabilized, the scientists began the intensive process of isolating, purifying, and testing the progenitor virus itself. The results of these early experiments were disastrous and terrifying, establishing the corporation's complete moral depravity. The progenitor virus was proven to be highly unstable and overwhelmingly lethal to human subjects, mirroring the high mortality rate observed in the Nepaya tribe's ritual. These experiments were conducted on a growing population of unwitting human test subjects, a secret operation that violated every ethical and legal standard imaginable. The focus was to find a way to stabilize the virus's mutagenic properties while mitigating its toxicity, a problem the scientists would grapple with for years. The scientific records from this period are filled with notes on countless failures and the swift, painful deaths of many test subjects. The virus, in its raw form, often caused rapid, grotesque mutation, followed by immediate systemic failure and death, creating horrifying but short-lived biological anomalies that were quickly incinerated and covered up. These brutal human experiments, kept secret from the public and even from most of the corporation's own employees, were fundamental to the research. It was through this trial and error, this continuous observation of how the virus interacted with human and animal genetics, that the researchers slowly began to understand the mechanics of the retrovirus's immense power. However, the period was also marked by a few crucial breakthroughs that kept the entire morally bankrupt project alive. The extensive testing allowed the researchers to successfully isolate specific genetic sequences and vectors that were responsible for the desired genetic uplift qualities, the superhuman strength and longevity, and to begin identifying the specific lethal agents that caused the universal fatality. These early, brutal tests were the essential precursor to the creation of the future, more successful, and most importantly, more stable viral strains. The knowledge gained from these thousands of dead test subjects in the Arklay labs was the direct intellectual property that enabled Dr. James Marcus to eventually combine progenitor with leech DNA, resulting in the successful development of the tyrant virus, or T-virus, which would finally give Umbrella the weapon it needed to generate the profits required for Spencer's long-term eugenics plan. These hidden Arklay labs, therefore, became the first true factory of biological terror, a secret monument to the corporation's utter inhumanity and the birthplace of the horror that would one day consume the entire region. Part 6, the Arklay Training Facility, opens 1978. By the year 1978, the Umbrella Corporation had successfully transitioned from its initial phase of raw viral discovery into the structured, large-scale process of weaponization and corporate indoctrination. This new phase was physically embodied by the full operational opening of the Arklay Training Facility, a massive, highly secured complex built deep within the surrounding raccoon forest area. While publicly, the corporation was a pharmaceutical giant, this facility was the true, secretive academy of the organization, designed not merely as a lab, but as a crucible for forging the future scientific and executive leadership of Umbrella, ensuring their absolute ideological loyalty to the vision of Oswell Spencer. The opening of this facility set the stage for the most intense period of T-virus research and the subsequent rivalries that would eventually cause the complete destruction of Raccoon City. The official, stated purpose of the Arklay Training Facility was the rigorous, sometimes brutal, training of future high-ranking executives and elite researchers. The core curriculum was rooted in the corporation's 3 sacred, non-negotiable principles: discipline, obedience, and unity. This was a system of absolute control intended to weed out any potential dissenters and ensure that every person in a position of power within the company was not only a scientific genius, but a loyal, morally detached operative of Spencer's eugenics agenda. The facility was run by Dr. James Marcus, who, since the death of Edward Ashford, had become the co-founder, most singularly focused on the scientific process, a fact that both drove the viral breakthroughs and eventually led to his tragic downfall. It was within the isolated, intense environment of this training facility that two key figures were recruited and began their meteoric rise through the company's ranks: Albert Wesker and William Birkin. Wesker and Birkin were both exceptionally brilliant young researchers, prodigies in their respective fields of virology and genetics, and they quickly became Dr. Marcus's star pupils. Under Marcus's direct, rigorous mentorship, they were given unprecedented access to the highly classified progenitor virus research and the earliest experimental strains of the T virus. They were instrumental in assisting Marcus with his increasingly successful attempts to stabilize the raw progenitor virus and refine its mutagenic applications, learning directly from the man who was perhaps the greatest scientific mind the corporation had ever produced. However, the dynamics at the facility were immediately and profoundly complicated by the fact that Wesker and Birkin were also double agents secretly working for Oswell Spencer. Spencer, always the paranoid mastermind, recognized the volatile genius of James Marcus and the threat he posed to Spencer's ultimate control. Spencer had tasked Wesker and Birkin with the specific, clandestine mission to monitor Marcus's research progress, assess the stability of the T virus, and most crucially, report back on any signs that Marcus might attempt to usurp Spencer's authority or withhold his discoveries. Wesker, in particular, was perfectly suited for this role, thanks to his own secret origins in Project W, a genetic enhancement program that Spencer had created to develop his ultimate, genetically superior rulers. The Arklay Training Facility, therefore, became a complex web of scientific discovery, power struggles, and profound betrayal. It was here that James Marcus achieved the final critical breakthrough by combining progenitor with leech DNA. But it was also here that the very agents he trained, Wesker and Birkin, were positioning themselves to steal his research and eliminate him on Spencer's orders. The facility, which served as the intellectual hub of the corporation's black operations, was simultaneously the stage for the most important scientific achievements and the most vicious, self-serving political maneuvers. The training ground for the next generation of executives was not just a place of learning. It was a breeding ground for the moral corruption, ambition, and ruthlessness that would eventually define the corporation and lead to its inevitable implosion in the decades that followed, starting with the very outbreak that originated within its walls. Part 7. Marcus's Leech, Research and the Birth of the T virus, the seminal, transformative breakthrough that propelled the Umbrella Corporation from a wealthy but struggling eugenics experiment into a genuine global threat capable of producing lethal bioorganic weapons, was achieved by Dr. James Marcus. Marcus, the co-founder and director of the Arklay Training Facility, was the scientist most frustrated by the recurring, crippling problem of the progenitor virus's high lethality and instability. The raw progenitor was too volatile, killing the vast majority of human test subjects too quickly, to be a reliable source for a viable, mass-producible bioweapon or a predictable genetic enhancement tool. Marcus recognized that the answer lay not in purifying the virus, but in stabilizing its transmission and mutation capabilities by fusing it with a common yet powerful biological organism. Marcus's genius lay in his highly unconventional approach. He shifted his focus from the expensive and complex flora of the stairway of the sunflower to a far more commonplace, yet biologically potent, life form: leeches. Dr. Marcus developed a morbid, scientific fascination with these organisms, observing their ability to survive in various environments and their unique methods of feeding and biological transmission. He began extensive experimentation in the hidden labs beneath the Arklay Training Facility, focusing on how the leech's DNA and internal structure could be used as a stable, biological intermediary for the powerful progenitor retrovirus. The critical, defining moment of discovery came when Marcus successfully combined the unstable RNA sequence of the progenitor virus with the DNA of leeches. The fusion of the ancient retrovirus with the robust biological structure of the leeches resulted in the successful development of a new, highly stable, and vastly more infectious viral strain. Marcus named this new creation the tyrant virus, or more commonly, the T-virus. This moment marked the end of the corporation's long, frustrating struggle with the raw progenitor. The T-virus was the game changer. It was the first strain capable of predictably and rapidly causing mass mutation in hosts. The primary effect of the T-virus was its ability to immediately degrade the host's cognitive functions, leading to the creation of the slow-moving, flesh-eating creatures, known universally as zombies. This was the unintended, yet highly marketable, side effect of the viral fusion. The T-virus could also, through further engineering, mutate larger organisms and humans into the ferocious, powerful bioorganic weapons that Umbrella intended to sell on the global black market, such as the later hunters and tyrants. The T-virus was the perfect, monetizable bioweapon. It was highly infectious, incredibly lethal, and produced predictable results that could be refined into military-grade biological assets. This discovery was the moment the Umbrella Corporation truly became a global threat. The T-virus gave them the potential for immense, industrial-scale profit, ensuring a perpetual flow of funding into Spencer's core eugenics project. Marcus's breakthrough solidified his position as the leading scientist, but also, paradoxically, sealed his fate. His success made him too powerful and too knowledgeable, directly challenging the fragile authority of Oswell Spencer. The creation of the T-virus in the bowels of the Arklay Training Facility was both the greatest scientific achievement of the early corporation and the direct cause of the political machinations that would lead to Marcus's assassination at the hands of his own pupils, Wesker and Birkin, a betrayal that would ultimately unleash the virus upon the world years later in an act of revenge. Part 8. The Ashford family decline and the rise of T-Veronica. Parallel to the groundbreaking T-virus research being conducted by James Marcus and William Birkin in the Arklay Mountains, a separate, equally ambitious and tragic storyline was unfolding within the family of one of the original founders, the Ashford family. The Ashford lineage was historically one of immense prestige and scientific contribution, but their influence within the Umbrella Corporation began a terminal decline following the suspicious death of founder Edward Ashford in a lab accident in 1968, shortly after the company's official founding. The mantle of the family fell to Edward's son, Alexander Ashford, a researcher who inherited his father's ambition but not his genius. Alexander was consumed by the idea of restoring his family's prestige and securing their historical position as the true intellectual equals of Oswell Spencer. His ambition became a frantic, desperate obsession to create a unique, revolutionary viral strain that would cement his family's name in history. This obsession led him down a dark path of genetic engineering, and profound ethical violation, culminating in one of the most bizarre and tragic chapters in Umbrella's history. Unable to achieve a groundbreaking viral discovery himself, Alexander pursued a radical plan. He used his family's vast genetic research to engineer twin children, using the preserved DNA of the family's revered ancestor, Veronica Ashford. These children, Alfred and Alexia, were intended to be a biological vessel for the reawakening of their ancestors' genius and nobility. While Alfred proved to be emotionally unstable and scientifically mediocre, Alexia Ashford quickly established herself as a staggering genius, a scientific prodigy of unprecedented ability. By the astonishing age of only 10 years old, Alexia had graduated from a prestigious university and was installed as a top umbrella researcher in the Antarctic base, a secluded lab that became her personal domain for viral experimentation. Alexia's singular focus was to create a viral strain that would surpass the lethality and predictability of the T-virus. By combining an insect retrovirus with the core mutagenic component of the progenitor virus, Alexia successfully developed the highly evolved and far more complex T-Veronica virus. The T-Veronica virus was engineered to be superior in every way to its predecessor, capable of profound, controlled mutation, immense intelligence retention in the host, and a host of terrifying new biological effects, including the ability to generate flammable compounds and control insects. However, the instability of the T-Veronica virus required a radical, irreversible stabilization process. Alexia correctly theorized that the virus needed a lengthy period of incubation within a stable host to fully integrate and become controllable. In a final, shocking act of commitment to her science, Alexia first experimented on her own father, Alexander, injecting him with the virus to observe the initial effects, which resulted in his grotesque, painful mutation into the creature known as Nosferatu. After confirming the virus's efficacy, Alexia then injected the T-Veronica virus into herself and immediately entered a state of cryogenic sleep in the Antarctic facility. This 15-year-long sleep was the necessary incubation period intended to stabilize the virus within her body, ensuring that when she awoke, she would have full control over the virus's immense powers, finally achieving the ultimate eugenics goal that had driven her family for generations. The rise of T-Veronica, therefore, was a deeply personal, tragic triumph of science, fueled by a family's desperation for prestige and orchestrated by a 10-year-old genius who was willing to sacrifice her own life and her father's body to prove her superiority to the ruling elite of the Umbrella Corporation. Part 9. Spencer's Betrayal. Assassination of James Marcus, 1988. The internal political landscape of the Umbrella Corporation was never defined by partnership or scientific collaboration, but by the relentless paranoia and absolute control demanded by the mastermind, Oswell Spencer. By the late 1988, the relationship between Spencer and his co-founder, Dr. James Marcus, had reached a critical, irreparable breaking point. Marcus, now operating as the director of the Arklay Training Facility, had achieved an unprecedented level of scientific power, successfully developing the stable, highly marketable T-virus. This immense success, however, was perceived by Spencer not as an asset, but as a severe, direct threat to his authority. Spencer, obsessed with maintaining his supreme position as the architect of the New World Order, became increasingly paranoid that James Marcus would use his success, his knowledge of the T-virus's original development, and his control over the primary research facility to usurp Spencer's position as the head of the corporation. Marcus, with his scientific single-mindedness, was too unpredictable, too brilliant and too indifferent to the corporate structure to be safely left alive. The co-founder who held the key to Umbrella's greatest weapon was now marked for elimination by the very man who had conceived the company. Spencer initiated the ultimate act of corporate betrayal, utilizing the very protégés Marcus had personally trained. He issued a direct, clandestine order to Albert Wesker and William Birkin, Marcus's most trusted and brilliant star pupils at the Arklay Training Facility, to carry out the assassination of their mentor. This order was a final, critical test of their loyalty to Spencer and the eugenics project. Both researchers, driven by their own ruthless ambition and desire to advance within the company, accepted the command without question, prioritizing their future corporate careers over any sense of scientific or personal loyalty to Marcus. The assassination was carried out with cold, clinical efficiency in 1988. Wesker and Birkin ambushed Dr. Marcus within the confines of his own research facility, the very location where he had created the T-virus breakthrough. They killed him, the scientific genius who had unlocked the path to global bioweaponry, and then immediately and callously disposed of his body, attempting to erase all physical evidence of their treason, and, crucially, making sure the circumstances of his death were recorded as a tragic yet convenient disappearance. The aftermath of this betrayal immediately and profoundly altered the power structure of the Umbrella Corporation. William Birkin, the more scientifically focused of the two assassins, immediately took control of the entire T-virus research program. He seized Marcus's notebooks, claimed credit for the monumental T-virus discovery, and inherited Marcus's role as the preeminent leading scientist for Umbrella, cementing his own career trajectory toward the development of the more powerful G-virus. Albert Wesker, having proven his loyalty to Spencer and his own ruthlessness, was promoted to an even higher level of espionage and strategic planning, eventually leading the Special Tactics and Rescue Service, or STARS, unit in Raccoon City as a deep cover agent. Spencer's successful betrayal of Marcus allowed him to suppress the truth about the T-virus's origin, rewrite Umbrella's scientific history to his own liking, and tighten his absolute, unquestioned control over the corporation. But the act of disposing of Marcus's body would have catastrophic, viral consequences a decade later. Part 10. The Trevor family and finalization of the Spencer mansion. The completion of the research facilities beneath the Arklay Mountains required a sophisticated final layer of deception, a cover story and a physical structure so grand and elaborate that its very existence would deflect all suspicion from the secret labs below. This massive undertaking fell to architect George Trevor, an accomplished designer hired directly by Oswell Spencer to construct a vast, ornate mansion that would serve as the public face for the hidden underground research complex. The finished building, which would later be infamously known as the Spencer Mansion, was the culmination of corporate arrogance and profound personal tragedy for the Trevor family. George Trevor was brought into the project under the illusion that he was designing an eccentric, wealthy man's private estate, unaware that his client was a eugenics mastermind, building a facility for illegal bioweapons research. Trevor's architectural mandate was simple: design a large, European-style mansion with elaborate internal structures, hidden passageways, and complex mechanical traps, all of which was secretly intended to serve as a complicated defense and security system for the laboratory complex built into the mountain beneath the structure. The mansion was to be the perfect, secluded cover, a beautiful, confusing facade for the horrifying scientific experiments taking place in the dark underbelly of the Arklay forest. Upon the completion of the mansion's primary structure, Oswell Spencer's paranoia and ruthless need for secrecy fully manifested. Spencer recognized that George Trevor knew the mansion's deepest secrets, the location of the hidden passages, the specific design of the security mechanisms, and the crucial connections to the underground laboratory. Trevor had become an unacceptable security risk. Spencer did not simply dismiss the architect. He ordered the complete, systematic elimination of the entire Trevor family to ensure the permanent secrecy of the Arklay labs, cementing this event as one of the Umbrella Corporation's first major cover-ups. The tragedy began with Trevor's wife, Jessica Trevor, and his daughter, Lisa Trevor. The two were lured to the mansion and immediately imprisoned in the hidden laboratory complex. They were injected with experimental strains of the progenitor virus and other early, unstable viral compounds, transforming them into unwitting, captive test subjects for the corporation's black research. This brutal act of utilizing the architect's own family demonstrated the corporation's profound moral depravity and its willingness to sacrifice any person to protect its core secrets. George Trevor himself was kept alive until the mansion was fully finalized, and Spencer had extracted every last piece of architectural knowledge he required. Once his purpose was served, Trevor was executed within the confines of his own creation. His disappearance and the subsequent fate of his family were all carefully engineered by Umbrella to be dismissed as a quiet, isolated tragedy, fully hidden from the public eye. The Spencer mansion itself became a literal monument to this family's destruction, a beautifully intricate, deadly structure that served as the perfect secluded cover for the Arklay research lab below, concealing decades of horrific experimentation. The tragic, viral immortality of Lisa Trevor would later provide the key genetic material for William Birkin's development of the G virus, ensuring that the Trevor family's suffering would continue to fuel the Umbrella Corporation's terrifying agenda for years to come. Part 11. Lisa Trevor, Umbrella's most tragic experiment. The vast, horrific history of the Umbrella Corporation is littered with the names of countless victims who were sacrificed to the altar of the progenitor virus and the dream of eugenics. But no single figure embodies the sheer, systematic cruelty of the company more tragically than Lisa Trevor. Her existence, spanning decades of agonizing experimentation within the hidden Arklay laboratories, represents the most profound and unforgivable symbol of Umbrella's inhumanity. Lisa was not merely a test subject. She was a personal victim of Oswell Spencer's paranoia, imprisoned alongside her mother, Jessica, after her architect father, George Trevor, completed the design of the mansion that served as their tomb. Her subsequent fate, however, was far more terrible than a simple death, as her body proved to be uniquely resilient to the primal power of the virus, turning her into a living, perpetual nightmare. Lisa's tragic saga began in the mid-1960s, when she and her mother were first brought into the newly constructed underground labs. While her mother eventually succumbed to the early, unstable viral strains, Lisa's young body reacted to the injections of the progenitor virus and its various early derivatives in an unexpected and terrifying manner. The virus, which was overwhelmingly lethal to almost all other test subjects, failed to kill Lisa. Instead, it embarked upon a slow, agonizing process of mutation and biological integration. Her cells did not succumb to systemic failure, but rather adapted, turning her into a living, perpetual laboratory for the corporation's researchers, who quickly seized upon her unique biological resilience as a resource. She endured decades of continuous, invasive experimentation, receiving countless viral cocktails and genetic manipulations designed to push the limits of human evolution and viral stability, effectively becoming a prisoner in a never-ending biological torture chamber from which she could not escape. The virus mutated Lisa into a creature of immense, grotesque power. Her body became a twisted mass of muscle, decaying tissue, and extraordinary regenerative capabilities. The virus granted her a near immortality, allowing her to survive injuries that would instantly kill any other life form. This terrifying ability to survive made her invaluable to Umbrella's research, as scientists like William Birkin could test the raw power and lethality of new viral strains directly on her without fear of losing their subject. The physical mutation, however, was only half the tragedy. The decades of pain, isolation, and viral trauma completely destroyed her mind. Her personality was reduced to an infantile, violent state, characterized by a single, heart-wrenching obsession: finding her mother, Jessica. She would wander the hidden passages and service tunnels of the Arklay complex, carrying a small collection of objects she believed belonged to her mother, often tearing off the faces of other female victims in a desperate, horrifying attempt to find her family. Lisa's unique, tragic existence served a profoundly significant purpose in the larger lore of the Umbrella Corporation. Her body became a living, genetic archive, a repository of viral mutation and stability that the scientists could continuously mine for research. Most critically, the samples extracted from Lisa Trevor were deemed the master key to the next great viral breakthrough. William Birkin, recognizing the unique stability and powerful mutagenic DNA found in her continuously adapting cells, utilized her genetic material as the foundational component for the development of his ultimate creation, the Golgotha virus, or G virus. Without Lisa Trevor's long, suffering life and her unique resistance to the progenitor virus, the G virus, the entity that would later destroy Raccoon City and transform Birkin into a monstrous abomination, would likely never have been created. The sheer scale of Lisa's tragedy was kept absolutely secret within the deepest levels of the Arklay labs. Even most high-ranking Umbrella executives were unaware of her true origins or the sheer depth of her suffering. Her fate serves as a dark, permanent indictment of the corporation's moral collapse, demonstrating that the pursuit of Oswell Spencer's eugenics ideal was built upon the ruins of innocent lives. Lisa Trevor's story is the emotional heart of the Arklay disaster, a perpetual warning that the company's scientific ambition was entirely divorced from humanity, culminating in a creature who was simultaneously a testament to the progenitor virus's power and a screaming symbol of Umbrella's deepest, most hidden crimes. Part 12. Birkin's Rise. G-Virus, Origins and Obsession. Following the betrayal and assassination of his mentor, Dr. James Marcus, in 1988, William Birkin entered a new, definitive phase of his career, transforming from a highly ambitious protege into the undisputed leading scientific mind of the Umbrella Corporation. Birkin immediately assumed control of the entire T-Virus research program in the Arklay labs, claiming sole credit for the development of the strain and erasing Marcus's historical contribution. However, for a man of Birkin's immense scientific ego, the T-Virus was quickly deemed insufficient. It created predictable, often mindless creatures like zombies and the powerful, yet ultimately controllable, tyrants. Birkin's ambition was to create something truly revolutionary, a virus that would grant the host a terrifying, perpetual control over their own evolution, a true biological masterpiece. Birkin's new focus led him to the hidden, tragic figure of Lisa Trevor. Recognizing her unique, long-standing exposure to the various progenitor strains and the astonishing adaptability of her cells, Birkin began extracting samples from her to use as the genetic foundation for his next creation. By combining the unique genetic material harvested from Lisa with new, highly unstable viral components, Birkin successfully developed the Golgotha virus, or G virus. This new virus was not merely an upgrade from the T virus. It was a completely different paradigm of biological weapon, a terrifying realization of the eugenics goals that had driven Oswell Spencer for decades, a masterpiece of uncontrolled, rapid mutation that Birkin rightly saw as his greatest contribution to science. The fundamental difference between the T virus and the G virus lies in their effect on the host. The T virus is a destructive agent, causing severe tissue necrosis, mental degradation, and mutation into a predictable pattern: zombies, hunters. The G virus, however, is a force of uncontrolled, perpetual mutation. When a host is infected, the virus does not settle into a final, stable form. Instead, it causes the host to evolve indefinitely, rapidly growing new eyes, limbs, and organs in response to damage or environmental changes. This ability to continuously mutate gave the G virus the potential to create a truly unstoppable, evolving superorganism, a biological entity capable of achieving the ultimate, forced evolutionary leap that Spencer and his colleagues had only dreamed of in the 1950s. Beyond endless mutation, the G virus possesses a unique and sinister reproductive function. The infected host gains the ability to reproduce by attempting to implant embryos into compatible human hosts. These parasitic embryos, known as G embryos, seek out and integrate with the new host's body, causing them to rapidly mutate into new G creatures. The G virus host is pathologically driven to seek out and infect genetically compatible individuals, a horrific biological imperative that forms the central conflict of the Raccoon City outbreak, where William Birkin himself, transformed into G. Birkin, obsessively hunts his own daughter, Sherry Birkin, as a viable breeding host. Birkin's relationship with his creation rapidly devolved into a profound, destructive obsession. He began to view the G virus not as a scientific discovery or a weapon, but as his own child, his masterpiece, and the only proof of his immense scientific worth. His increasingly isolationist behavior and his refusal to share his research with the wider Umbrella Corporation became a major concern for Spencer. Birkin's overprotectiveness of his masterpiece eventually triggered the sequence of events that led to the Raccoon City disaster. In September 1998, when Umbrella dispatched a paramilitary team to confiscate his G virus samples at the underground Nest laboratory, Birkin refused to surrender his life's work. Instead, he made the fatal, desperate choice to inject himself with the virus, unleashing his monstrous creation upon the world and initiating the full city-wide biological catastrophe. Birkin's rise, fueled by betrayal and culminating in his obsession with the G virus, became the single most dangerous factor in the entire Umbrella Corporation's history. Part 13. Umbrella's early BOW programs. Cerberus, Hunter, Chimera. The transition of the Umbrella Corporation from a shadowy research initiative focused on the highly lethal progenitor virus into a dominant global force was achieved through a calculated, deliberate shift toward the mass manufacturing and sale of bioorganic weapons, or BOWs. Once Dr. James Marcus stabilized the progenitor virus into the reliable T virus, the company pivoted its focus from scientific discovery to industrial-scale military production. The immense profits generated by selling these unique, devastating biological assets on the global black market were absolutely essential to continually fund Oswell Spencer's core eugenics project and his desire to engineer the Übermensch. The early BOW programs established the fundamental structure of Umbrella's military product line, demonstrating the versatility and destructive power of the new viral strain. These first-generation biological products were intended for deployment in hostile environments, specialized warfare, and as terrifying biological deterrents, quickly establishing Umbrella as the undisputed world leader in the black market arms trade. The first and simplest BOWs were modifications of common animal life, making them easy to mass produce and deploy in large numbers. The most recognizable of these was the Cerberus, which were nothing more than Doberman pinschers infected with the T-virus. The virus rapidly mutated the dogs, giving them increased speed, viciousness, and durability, transforming them into pack-hunting biological terror weapons that were highly effective at overwhelming disorganized civilian or military targets. As the research progressed, Umbrella moved onto more complex, genetically engineered organisms designed for specific combat roles. The Hunter program, one of Umbrella's most famous and successful early BOWs, was the result of combining a human ovum with reptilian DNA and the T-virus. This genetic fusion resulted in the creation of a terrifying bipedal creature that possessed immense physical strength, razor-sharp claws capable of decapitating a human with a single swipe, and a speed that far exceeded that of the standard zombie. The Hunter was engineered to be an elite predator, capable of navigating complex indoor environments like the Spencer Mansion and executing quick, lethal eliminations, making it a perfect tool for infiltration and targeted assassination. The existence of the Hunter proved that the T-virus could be utilized to create hybrids that retained some level of tactical intelligence, a crucial step toward the ultimate goal of the Tyrant program. Another grotesque creation from this early period was the Chimera, a biological weapon that truly highlighted the dark scientific imagination of the Arklay labs. The Chimera was a hybrid created by fusing the genes of a human with those of a massive fly or other insect, again utilizing the T-virus as the mutagenic catalyst. This creature possessed the powerful torso and limbs of a human, but with the terrifying head, eyes, and segmented body of an insect, granting it the ability to crawl across ceilings and walls with impossible speed and silence. The Chimera was designed for surprise attack and overwhelming terror in contained spaces. The very existence of these early BOWs, Cerberus, Hunter, Chimera, demonstrated that the Umbrella Corporation had perfected the art of weaponizing their viral discoveries. They had created a sustainable, highly profitable business model where every dollar earned from selling biological terror was immediately reinvested into the highly secretive G-virus and Project W's experiments, ensuring that the corporate machine of evil could continue to operate indefinitely, shielded by the walls of their pharmaceutical front and the continuous flow of global black market funds. Part 14. The Tyrant Program, T001 to T002. Evolution. The ultimate expression of the Umbrella Corporation's military ambition was the Tyrant Program, a massive undertaking dedicated to creating the definitive, most powerful bioorganic weapon possible. A human-like super soldier. The goal was simple but elusive. An intelligent, immensely powerful, genetically perfect warrior capable of following complex commands and devastating a conventional military force. This was the pinnacle of T-virus weaponization, the commercialized realization of the Übermensch ideal, for which Oswell Spencer and his partners had founded the corporation. The process of achieving this pinnacle, however, was marked by years of failure, mutation, and catastrophic loss of life in the labs. The early stages of the program were plagued by instability and failure, proving that while the T-virus could easily mutate hosts, it struggled to maintain the necessary cognitive function and structural stability required for a true super soldier. The first major attempt, the T-001 prototype, was a grotesque demonstration of these failures. The host, usually a genetically compatible human subject with a high natural resilience to the T virus, would mutate severely, gaining immense size and strength. However, the transformation was often incomplete, leading to exposed organs, extreme disfigurement, and most critically, a lack of the necessary physical stability to follow orders or engage in sustained combat. The T-001 prototypes were simply unstable monsters, biological failures that had to be contained and destroyed, yet they provided the critical data necessary to refine the process and move toward a successful model. The research team, driven by the ruthlessness of William Birkin and the demands of Oswell Spencer, learned from the failures of the T-001 and began refining the genetic selection process and the viral delivery mechanism. They focused on finding subjects with highly specific genetic markers and using a stabilized viral cocktail. This persistent refinement eventually led to the creation of the most successful early model, the T-002 Tyrant. The T-002 represented the breakthrough that Umbrella had long sought. It was a powerfully built, bipedal humanoid creature with overwhelming strength, capable of delivering immense blunt force damage and surviving catastrophic physical trauma. Crucially, the T-002 retained the core genetic programming necessary to follow specific, lethal orders, making it a viable, controllable, bioorganic weapon ready for deployment. The T-002 model was the terrifying monster encountered by the surviving members of the STARS unit in the underground laboratory of the Spencer Mansion in July 1998. It was the weapon that Albert Wesker, acting as Spencer's double agent, unleashed in his final act of betrayal, believing it would eliminate the remaining STARS members and destroy all evidence of Umbrella's crimes. The Tyrant, with its exposed heart and massive claws, was the physical manifestation of Umbrella's ultimate ambition and the most lethal creation of the Arklay labs. Its existence proved the potential of the T-virus to create a true super soldier, a capability that would later be further refined with the introduction of the Nemesis T-type and other, more powerful iterations. The evolution from the unstable, disfigured T-001 to the powerful, lethal T-002 was not just a scientific victory for Umbrella. It was the realization of a commercial weapon that guaranteed the corporation continued dominance in the global black market, ensuring the perpetual flow of funds for Spencer's core, eugenics obsession. Part 15, Project W, Albert Wesker's True Purpose. The story of Albert Wesker, the iconic, sunglass-wearing supervillain of the Resident Evil franchise, is far deeper and more complex than that of a mere talented researcher or a corporate spy. His entire life, his career, and his unique abilities were the result of a profound, highly secretive eugenics experiment orchestrated by Oswell Spencer, known only as Project W or Project Wesker. This project, initiated by Spencer decades before the Raccoon City incident, was the core, ultimate manifestation of his obsession with creating a genetically superior race to rule his new world, placing Wesker at the very center of Umbrella's deepest, most sinister secrets. Project W began with the collection of 13 children, all sharing the common surname Wesker, who were secretly tracked down and adopted by the Umbrella Corporation. These children were carefully chosen based on their superior genetics, intelligence, and potential for radical evolution. They were then secretly raised and educated in controlled, isolated environments, where they were indoctrinated with Spencer's superior ideology and his absolute belief in the necessity of culling the weak to achieve a new world order. The entire purpose of their existence was to serve as the ultimate, involuntary test subjects for the final stage of Spencer's plan. A plan that transcended the simple bioweapons trade. The final phase of the experiment involved injecting each of the 13 children with a special prototype virus, a highly evolved, stabilized derivative of the progenitor virus, far more refined than the chaotic T virus. This was the ultimate genetic litmus test. Spencer's theory was that this virus would act as a powerful mutagenic filter. The vast majority of the children would die, proving their genetic inferiority, while only the select few who possessed the necessary latent genetic superiority would survive the viral trauma. These survivors would then develop superhuman abilities, becoming the Übermensch elite that Spencer intended to serve as the genetically perfect rulers of his new world. Albert Wesker was one of the absolute few who successfully survived the intense viral injection. The prototype virus integrated perfectly with his unique genetic structure, granting him superhuman strength, speed, and agility, along with astonishing regenerative abilities. However, Wesker, true to his secretive nature, kept these incredible powers hidden from Spencer for many years, acting the part of the talented, ruthless executive and double agent. This secrecy was crucial, as Wesker's true goal was not to serve Spencer, but to usurp him and use the stolen Umbrella data and BOWs to enact his own vision of global forced evolution, a goal that would make him the primary antagonist for decades to come. Wesker's career path, moving from a star researcher under Marcus to a deep cover operative and team leader of STARS, was entirely orchestrated by Spencer to ensure Wesker was always positioned near the most crucial research and assets. However, the revelation that Wesker was a successful result of Project W redefines his role in the law. He was not just a traitorous employee, he was a literal eugenics creation of the founder, a living testament to Spencer's ultimate goal. The prototype virus in his blood and the superior, cold ideology instilled in him since childhood made him the most dangerous man in the Umbrella Corporation, setting the stage for his intentional betrayal and subsequent transformation into the empowered global terrorist who would pursue his own God complex. Fueled by the vast resources and scientific secrets he stole from the very corporation that created him. Part 16. The Arklay outbreak begins, 1998. The long, hidden countdown to the ultimate biological disaster that would destroy Raccoon City finally reached zero in July 1998, initiating the catastrophic sequence of events known as the Arklay outbreak. This initial stage of the disaster, which precedes the famous mansion incident, was not the result of a fresh corporate accident, but the long-delayed supernatural revenge of a murdered co-founder. The events confirm that the ruthless political machinations of the Umbrella Corporation ultimately led to its scientific undoing, as the T-Veronica research, which had been confined and controlled for decades, was finally and violently liberated from the isolation of the Arklay Mountains and unleashed upon the surrounding environment and population. The source of the leak originated directly from the Arklay Training Facility, the secret hub where Dr. James Marcus had been assassinated a decade prior. Unbeknownst to his killers, Albert Wesker and William Birkin, the viral creation of Dr. Marcus had survived and was seeking vengeance. Marcus's unique strain of the T-virus was developed using a fusion of progenitor and the DNA of leeches. The massive biological mass of the leeches, having been infused with the consciousness and resentment of their murdered master, had evolved into a single, collective, intelligent entity known as the Queen Leech. This powerful, newly awakened BOW began its campaign of revenge by actively sabotaging the facility and causing the first major, irreversible T-virus escape into the forest environment surrounding the training grounds. Once released, the virus began its predictable, terrifying spread through the raccoon forest. The initial victims were not humans, but the wildlife. Reports soon began flooding the Raccoon City Police Department, RPD, of bizarre and increasingly violent animal deaths. Hikers and local farmers discovered the horrifying, mutilated carcasses of deer, birds, and other creatures, victims of the newly infected predators and the viral mutation. These initial victims were quickly transformed by the T-virus into grotesque, flesh-consuming creatures, the first generation of bioorganic weapons to leave the confines of the laboratory and stalk the public lands. The corporate cover-up was already in full effect, with Umbrella's agents working furiously to contain the initial reports. But the sheer scale of the environmental contamination made a complete suppression impossible. As the infected animals began to attack humans, the reports shifted from animal deaths to escalating incidents of missing hikers and unconfirmed, nightmarish sightings among the locals. The victims of these attacks, when found, were unrecognizable, having undergone the signature cognitive degrading effects of the T-virus that transformed them into the classic, shuffling, cannibalistic zombies. The presence of these horrific, formerly human creatures in the usually quiet mountain region was impossible for the RPD to ignore, but the official communication from the Umbrella Corporation and its highly placed political allies in Raccoon City was a constant, calculated stream of denial and obfuscation, blaming the incidents on everything from cult activity to aggressive mutant bears. The growing, undeniable crisis eventually forced the hand of the RPD's elite, specialized task force, the STARS unit, which was officially formed to handle situations that exceeded the capability of conventional police forces. In response to the wave of bizarre reports and mounting evidence of an uncontainable threat, the STARS unit was deployed to the remote Arklay mountain area in July 1998 to investigate the series of missing person reports and the unconfirmed sightings of monsters. This deployment was the critical pivot point that transformed a corporate cover-up into the final public disaster. The deployment of the STARS Bravo team was the first official, non-umbrella intervention into the corporate conspiracy, and it was a mission destined for failure. The entire operation was compromised from the start, as the unit was secretly led by Albert Wesker, the Project W subject and double agent who was working directly for Oswell Spencer. Wesker's true mission was not to solve the mystery, but to lure the STARS teams into the Arklay labs, collect crucial combat data on Umbrella's BOWs, and ultimately eliminate all witnesses to the company's decades of illegal experimentation, ensuring the absolute, permanent secrecy of the Umbrella Corporation's entire operation. The revenge of James Marcus had opened the door, and the betrayal of Albert Wesker was poised to slam it shut on the survivors. Part 17. Resident Evil 0. The Training Facility Outbreak. The events documented in Resident Evil 0 serve as the immediate, harrowing prologue to the famed mansion incident, detailing the very first phase of the Arklay outbreak and the direct consequences of Oswell Spencer's long-ago assassination of his co-founder. The narrative begins in July 1998, directly following the deployment of the STARS Bravo team into the Raccoon Forest to investigate the gruesome, bizarre animal deaths and missing hiker reports. Their helicopter, mysteriously disabled during the flight, crashes near a seemingly abandoned military transport train, forcing the team to split up, a common tactic in horror that leaves them vulnerable to the biological terror that awaits them. The core of the story focuses on two unlikely survivors who form a desperate alliance: Rebecca Chambers, a brilliant, inexperienced Stars Bravo team member who serves as the unit's medic, and Billy Cohen, a former Marine convicted of murder who was being transported on the crashed military train. Their discovery of the train, which is soon revealed to be a rolling laboratory and transport for the Umbrella Corporation, leads them directly into the heart of the initial bioweapon disaster. The train is quickly overrun by the first wave of T-Virus infected, setting the stage for their desperate, life-altering struggle for survival as they realize the truth. The missing hikers and the monstrous creatures are not the work of a cult, but the deliberate, escaped creations of a massive, well-funded corporation. Their desperate journey eventually leads them from the wreckage of the train to the vast, secluded Arklay Training Facility, the very building where Dr. James Marcus conducted his most vital research and where he was ultimately betrayed and killed. It is within the dark, expansive halls of this facility that Rebecca and Billy Cohen uncover the terrifying truth of the outbreak's origins. They discover the preserved, detailed research notes of Dr. Marcus, realizing that the corporate crime was not merely an accidental leak, but a planned, malicious act of revenge. They encounter the sentient, vengeful entity at the center of the disaster, the resurrected James Marcus, who has been biologically integrated with and is now entirely controlled by the Queen Leech, a massive BOW that evolved from his original T-Virus creation. The Queen Leech, channeling the furious consciousness of Dr. Marcus, is responsible for initiating the outbreak. It sabotaged the Bravo team's helicopter and unleashed the viral chaos upon the region, all in a cold, precise attempt to exact revenge on Oswell Spencer and the corporation that murdered its creator. Rebecca and Billy Cohen must confront this incredibly powerful, new form of biological evil, a creature that has mastered the T-Virus and is capable of incredible speed, strength, and biological control over other infected life forms. Their confrontation with the Queen Leech and their subsequent destruction of the training facility is a necessary, successful cleanup operation, but it comes too late to stop the spread of the infection. The crucial consequence of the events in Resident Evil 0 is that the initial viral outbreak is contained within the facility, but the path to the main facility, the Spencer Mansion, is now irrevocably established. The surviving Stars Bravo team members, now scattered and suffering casualties, are forced up the mountain path toward the mansion, seeking refuge and assistance. The terrifying biological forces unleashed by the Queen Leech had already contaminated the environment, and the trail of the missing Bravo team would soon draw the Stars Alpha team directly to the mansion's gates, allowing Albert Wesker to finally implement his fatal corporate master plan to eliminate the witnesses and secure the most valuable assets of the Umbrella Corporation's entire decades-long BOW program. Part 18. The Mansion Incident. Resident Evil 1. The events of Resident Evil 1, widely known as the Mansion Incident, represent the true public awakening to the vast, horrific conspiracy of the Umbrella Corporation and the catastrophic failure of its core security protocols. The incident began on July 24, 1998, days after the initial outbreak was confirmed in the Raccoon Forest. The Stars Alpha team, including future franchise heroes Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, along with the team leader and secret double agent Albert Wesker, was deployed to the Arklay Mountains with the stated mission to find the missing Bravo team, who were presumed lost following their helicopter crash. The Alpha team's arrival was immediately met with terror. After suffering a horrific surprise attack by infected Cerberus dogs, the survivors were forced to take shelter in the imposing, seemingly abandoned structure known as the Spencer Mansion, the massive house designed by the late George Trevor to serve as the perfect, opulent facade for the hidden laboratories below. Once inside, the survivors quickly realized that they were not in a mere abandoned house. They were trapped in a complex, booby-trapped facility teeming with the escaped, terrifying biological experiments of the Umbrella Corporation. The mansion was a terrifying museum of Umbrella's early BOWs, forcing the STARS members to confront grotesque creatures like the slow, shambling zombies, the swift, lethal hunters, and the agile, ceiling-crawling chimeras, all products of the early mass manufacturing phase of the T-Virus research program. As the few remaining members of the STARS unit fought their way through the mansion's elaborate traps and hidden passages, they began to uncover the horrifying truth about the house's origins. They found scattered diaries, confidential research notes, and the tragic evidence of the Trevor family's destruction, all of which pointed toward the fact that the Spencer mansion was merely a secretive entrance to a vast, multi-layered underground research facility where the T-Virus and its related BOWs were created and stored. This discovery immediately exposed the entire pharmaceutical front of the Umbrella Corporation as a colossal criminal conspiracy, dedicated not to healing, but to biological warfare. The ultimate act of betrayal and the central dramatic climax of the incident came with the definitive exposure of Albert Wesker. Wesker, who had led the STARS team into the mansion, was finally revealed to be a highly placed, ruthless double agent for Oswell Spencer. His true mission was twofold: to gather combat data by observing the STARS members fight against Umbrella's escaped BOWs, and then, once the data was collected, to eliminate all remaining witnesses and destroy the entire facility, thereby protecting the core secrets of the Umbrella Corporation. Wesker, utilizing the knowledge he had gained from his years of research and his unique, superhuman abilities from Project W, unleashed the ultimate BOW in the facility's deepest laboratory, the terrifying, surgically perfected T-Veronica tyrant. In the ensuing chaos, Wesker was forced to fake his own death after a fierce confrontation, sacrificing a life he no longer needed to maintain his cover and allowing him to escape the facility with his Project W abilities intact and his ultimate goal, to steal Umbrella's core data, still achievable. The few remaining survivors of the STARS Alpha team, specifically Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, narrowly managed to destroy the T-002 tyrant and successfully initiate the facility's self-destruct sequence, finally eliminating the physical evidence of the Arklay labs. Their escape from the burning mansion, however, was not the end of the disaster, but merely the end of the beginning. They emerged from the forest with the undeniable truth of the Umbrella Corporation's crimes, but the T-Virus itself had already spread, and the stage was now set for the full citywide catastrophe that would erupt in September 1998. Part 19. Raccoon City Infection Sparks, September 1998. Just 2 short months after the closure and destruction of the Spencer Mansion, a second, far more catastrophic disaster unfolded, initiating the full, uncontainable citywide outbreak that became the defining moment of the Umbrella Corporation's entire history. This disaster, which plunged Raccoon City into a nightmare of biological terror, was entirely the result of the megalomaniacal ambition and final, desperate betrayal of William Birkin, the disgraced star scientist and co-assassin of James Marcus. Birkin's refusal to surrender his masterpiece, the virus, to the company he served, triggered the chain reaction that finally brought the corporation down. In September 1998, after the massive embarrassment and exposure of the Arklay labs and the mansion incident, the Umbrella Corporation focused its efforts on securing its most valuable asset, the completed, stabilized samples of the Golgotha virus, or Gvirus, which were housed in the massive, secretive, underground laboratory known as NEST, located directly beneath Raccoon City. Umbrella dispatched a heavily armed, highly trained paramilitary retrieval team, known as the USS, with the specific, ruthless mission to seize Birkin's research and samples, bring them under corporate control, and likely silence Birkin himself. William Birkin, who had grown pathologically possessive of the virus, viewing it as his own biological child, violently resisted the seizure of his research. Despite the overwhelming force of the USS retrieval team, Birkin initiated a fierce, desperate confrontation in the lab tunnels. During the scuffle, Birkin was mortally wounded by the USS operative's gunfire, an injury that left him dying on the cold laboratory floor, facing the complete loss of his life's work. In a final, decisive act of self-preservation and scientific madness, Birkin made the irreversible choice. He took his remaining, completed Gvirus sample and injected it directly into his own body. The injection saved his life, but destroyed his humanity, instantly turning him into the first-generation G creature. Birkin, in his terrifying, rapidly mutating new form, immediately and brutally slaughtered the entire paramilitary retrieval team that had been sent to kill him and steal his research, marking the USS operatives as the first victims of the advanced, unstable viral strain. The confrontation was an absolute mess of biological horror, and the most crucial consequence occurred entirely by accident. In the chaos, the T-virus and virus samples that the USS team had secured were dropped and shattered. The viral agents, highly concentrated and incredibly potent, were spilled onto the floor and carried by the most effective and pervasive vectors available, the local population of rats. The rats, quickly infected and mutated, carried the T-virus and the Gvirus from the destroyed samples in the underground Nest laboratory directly into Raccoon City's vast, complex water and sewer systems. This was the irreversible, terminal event. The viral contamination spread rapidly through the city's infrastructure, infecting the city's water supply and the thousands of rats that infested the catacombs, sparking the full, citywide T-virus outbreak that would quickly overwhelm the RPD and the entire civilian population. Birkin's single, desperate act of preserving his Gvirus masterpiece led directly to the ultimate destruction of the city he lived in, setting in motion the nightmarish events of Resident Evil 2 and 3 as the virus spread uncontrollably from the sewers into the very heart of the municipal infrastructure. Part 20. G-Virus Mutations, Birkin's Transformation and Pursuit. The horrific transformation of William Birkin into the entity known as G. Birkin is not merely a subplot in the Raccoon City outbreak. It is the central, unstoppable engine of terror that drives the entire Resident Evil 2 narrative. Unlike the relatively predictable, stabilizing mutations caused by the T-virus, Birkin's self-injection of the virus triggered a process of rapid, continuous, and uncontrolled mutation that was unique in the Umbrella Corporation's catalogue of bioweapons. This unchecked mutation quickly transformed the disgraced scientist into a terrifying, multi-staged monster with a singular, pathological biological imperative to reproduce. The initial, agonizing stage of G. Birkin's transformation, which occurred immediately after he slaughtered the USS retrieval team, was only the beginning. As he took damage from his confrontation with the USS and the subsequent battles with survivors like Leon S. Kennedy and Claire Redfield, the virus would not allow him to die or stabilize. Instead, it would force his body to evolve and adapt, rapidly growing new organs, massive limbs, and additional sensory receptors. Most notably, the multiple, terrifying, pulsating eyeballs that appear across his body. Each stage of the transformation presents a more grotesque, terrifyingly powerful version of the creature. A perpetual biological escalation that reflects the virus's signature ability to cause the host to evolve indefinitely and uncontrollably. G. Birkin's relentless pursuit of the survivors through the dark, confined spaces of the Nest Laboratory and the sprawling sewer catacombs beneath Raccoon City is driven by the most sinister, defining feature of the virus: its unique reproductive function. The virus host is pathologically compelled to seek out a genetically compatible human host, into which it can implant a G embryo. The virus ensures the survival of its strain by attempting to turn a fresh, compatible host into a new G creature, thereby starting a new, localized infection chain. This biological imperative means that the G. Krekin monster is not hunting out of simple aggression. It is hunting with a deadly, focused biological purpose, making it one of the most terrifying, relentless predators in the entire franchise. The focus of this pathological hunt is Birkin's own daughter, Sherry Birkin. The virus dictates that a close genetic relative is the most compatible and therefore the most desirable host for the implantation of its parasitic G embryos. This biological reality adds a layer of profound, personal horror to the outbreak. The monstrous creature relentlessly stalking the survivors through the infected city is the twisted, mutated form of Sherry's father, driven by a genetic imperative to destroy and then reproduce through her. The survival of Sherry, who is protected by Claire Redfield, becomes the central objective of the entire journey through the decaying city and the underground labs, as she is the target of the virus's entire life cycle. Ultimately, G. Birkin's continuous transformation leads him through multiple, escalating stages of mutation, culminating in a massive, monstrous form that is barely recognizable as human, and finally, a terrifying, massive, amoeba-like mass of teeth and claws that attempts to consume the final survivors on the escape train. The destruction of this final form marks the temporary end of the virus threat, but the sheer, devastating power of Birkin's transformation confirms the virus as the single most dangerous, unpredictable BOW that the Umbrella Corporation ever created. Birkin's self-injection and subsequent horrific existence ensured that Raccoon City was simultaneously contaminated by two distinct and terrifying viral threats: the rapid, citywide zombie plague of the T-virus and the unstoppable, mutating terror of the virus, driven by a single, terrifyingly determined monster. Part 21. Resident Evil 2. Collapse of the RPD and sewer catacombs. The true, unbridled horror of the Umbrella Corporation's legacy was revealed in the complete, rapid destruction of Raccoon City, an event most vividly chronicled during the terrifying timeline of Resident Evil 2. This part of the narrative begins shortly after the citywide infection had sparked in September 1998, following William Birkin's catastrophic, self-inflicted mutation and the subsequent spillage of the T-virus and G-virus samples into the municipal sewer system. The focus shifts from the isolated labs of the Arklay Mountains to the urban landscape, where the sheer scale and lethality of the virus overwhelmed all conventional defenses, confirming the success of Umbrella's ultimate biological weapon. The central figures in this urban nightmare are Leon S. Kennedy, a rookie police officer arriving in the city for his first day on the job, and Claire Redfield, a young woman who entered the city seeking her missing brother, Chris Redfield, one of the few survivors of the original mansion incident. Their arrival coincides with the absolute collapse of the Raccoon City Police Department, or RPD. The once grand, securely designed police station, which itself housed secret Umbrella facilities and hidden passages, quickly became a fortified tomb. The virus infection spread so quickly through the city's population that the RPD officers were simply overwhelmed, leading to the creation of hordes of police zombies that turned the symbol of civic order into a deadly, labyrinthine trap. Leon and Claire's immediate struggle for survival within the halls of the RPD building provides a graphic, immediate demonstration of the viral contagion's unstoppable power. Their desperate effort to escape the city forces them to navigate a series of terrifying, interconnected subterranean environments. The RPD building acts as a gateway to the vast, decaying network of the city's sewer catacombs, which itself connects to the deepest, most critical location, the massive, secret underground laboratory known as Nest. This complex architectural progression reflects the increasing danger, moving from an overt civilian disaster to the hidden scientific epicenter of the catastrophe. The sewers are not just obstacles, they are the literal transmission lines of the outbreak, still teeming with the infected rats that carried the virus and with the highly advanced BOWs that Umbrella had developed, including the highly effective Agile hunters. Their journey through these dark, confined spaces is complicated by the presence of other key figures, including the mysterious Ada Wong, a spy seeking to steal the virus for her own organization, and the central, tragic victim of the outbreak, Sherry Birkin, the young daughter of the mutated scientist William Birkin. Sherry's survival is critical because she is the singular, genetically compatible target of the raging, constantly mutating G. Birkin monster, who relentlessly hunts them through the catacombs and the lab, driven by the virus imperative to implant a parasitic embryo. The protection of Sherry from her own monstrous father becomes a central, desperate act of humanity in the face of absolute biological collapse. The ultimate escape requires navigating the Nest laboratory, the true source of the city's contamination. Within this vast, sprawling underground complex, the survivors find the final evidence of the Umbrella Corporation's conspiracy, the viral samples and the genetic material that fueled their decades of illegal research, their successful acquisition of a vaccine for Sherry, and their desperate flight from the final, horrifying mutation of G. Birkin on a stolen military train marks the conclusion of the immediate crisis. However, the events of Resident Evil 2 were instrumental in demonstrating the T-Virus's capability for massive urban destruction and provided the definitive, irrefutable proof that the Umbrella Corporation was responsible for a public health catastrophe of epic proportions, a reality that would soon force the attention of the entire world upon the single burning city. Part 22. Resident Evil 3, Nemesis and UBCS deployment. In September 1998. While Leon S. Kennedy and Claire Redfield were struggling to survive the RPD and the underground tunnels, another simultaneous narrative of survival was unfolding in the city, detailing the experiences of Jill Valentine and the desperate, cynical response of the Umbrella Corporation itself. Resident Evil 3 details Jill Valentine's fight to survive the initial, full-scale devastation of Raccoon City in September 1998, revealing the ruthless, strategic deployment of corporate military assets by Umbrella to manage and, more importantly, exploit the bioweapon disaster they had created. The story centers on Jill Valentine, one of the few surviving members of the STARS Alpha team who was present at the mansion incident. Knowing too much, Jill had already become a priority target for elimination by Oswell Spencer's organization. Umbrella's response to the uncontrolled urban outbreak was two-pronged, focusing on both internal security and external profit. First, the corporation deployed the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, or UBCS, a private military force composed primarily of non-Umbrella affiliated mercenaries. The public purpose of the UBCS was to contain the outbreak and rescue the remaining civilians, but their true clandestine function was twofold: to provide combat data by testing Umbrella's BOWs against live, armed resistance, and to assist in the final phases of the cover-up, ensuring that all incriminating evidence and remaining witnesses were eventually silenced. The second, far more terrifying component of Umbrella's deployment was the introduction of the Nemesis T-type. The Nemesis was the most advanced, surgically precise evolution of the Tyrant program, representing the current pinnacle of T-virus weaponization. This BOW was created by combining the base T-0002 Tyrant with a highly advanced intelligent parasitic life form known as the Nemesis parasite. The parasite integrated with the host's brain, granting the massive, powerful Tyrant a vastly improved level of intelligence, strategic awareness, and crucially, the ability to operate complex weapons and follow specific, long-term commands. The Nemesis T-type was given one absolute, non-negotiable mission: to eliminate all remaining STARS members. This specialized monster relentlessly stalks Jill Valentine throughout the city, serving as the physical embodiment of Umbrella's obsession with destroying anyone who could expose their conspiracy to the world. Jill Valentine's desperate struggle is often aided by a member of the UBCS, Carlos Oliveira, a mercenary who eventually realizes the profound deception and moral corruption of the corporation he serves. Through their combined efforts, they manage to navigate the ruined, infected city, evading the unstoppable Nemesis and the hordes of the T-virus infected, while simultaneously attempting to find a means of escape and, critically, locate the scientific means to counter the deadly airborne strain of the virus now sweeping the city. The deployment of the UBCS and the Nemesis T-type during the peak of the outbreak reveals the true, cold calculus of the Umbrella Corporation. Even in the face of a complete global scandal and the loss of an entire city, their primary concerns were still data acquisition and the protection of their core research. Raccoon City was not a tragedy to them. It was a massively expensive, yet profoundly valuable, live fire testing ground where they could collect combat data on their most dangerous BOWs and eliminate the last vestiges of resistance before the United States government was forced to take a final, catastrophic action. Part 23: The Dead Factory and Final Evidence Cover-Up. As the T-virus and G-virus ran rampant, consuming the remaining population of Raccoon City, the Umbrella Corporation pivoted to its final, ruthless priority: the complete, systematic destruction of all incriminating evidence. The goal was simple: ensure that if the city had to be sacrificed, the full depth of Umbrella's decades-long conspiracy would die with it, shielding Oswell Spencer and the corporation from global prosecution. This phase of the outbreak involved the methodical elimination of witnesses and the incineration of key facilities, making the final days of Raccoon City a race against time for anyone who possessed knowledge or proof of Umbrella's crimes. A key facility targeted for elimination was the Dead Factory, which served as Umbrella's primary waste disposal and incineration facility for the toxins and biohazard byproducts produced by the Nest Laboratory and the Arklay Labs. The destruction of this facility, along with numerous auxiliary labs and storage centers, was crucial to preventing any physical samples, chemical residue, or documented evidence from falling into the hands of investigators, or, more dangerously, the media. Umbrella employed its own internal monitors and agents, often embedded within the UBCS teams, to oversee this scorched earth operation and ensure that every piece of scientific evidence was permanently wiped out. These internal operatives, such as the cold, calculating Nikolai Jinovev, were specifically tasked with ensuring the success of the evidence cover-up. Genovef and others, like him, secretly worked to silence all potential witnesses, including other members of the UBCS teams, the few remaining RPD personnel, and any civilians who might have stumbled upon the truth. Their orders were to prioritize the security of Umbrella's assets over any human life, effectively turning the mercenaries into targets once they had served their purpose of gathering combat data. This added an extra layer of peril for survivors like Jill Valentine and Carlos Oliveira, who not only had to contend with the relentless pursuit of the Nemesis T-type, but also the cynical sabotage and targeted attacks from Umbrella's own agents. The core struggle of the final survivors became a desperate, two-pronged race. First, to acquire the necessary vaccine to treat the T-virus exposure that threatened to turn them into zombies, and second, to escape the burning city before the military arrived to implement a final, absolute solution. The successful retrieval of the vaccine from one of the remaining functional laboratories was not just a means of personal survival. It was a small, symbolic victory against the corporation's complete control over biological life and death. The systematic destruction of the Dead Factory and other key evidence centers by Umbrella's agents ensured that when the inevitable military intervention occurred, the full, undeniable proof of the conspiracy was largely buried under tons of rubble and ash. The corporation made a calculated decision that the legal battle over a destroyed city with minimal evidence was far preferable to a full global exposure of their decades of illegal BOW production and eugenics experiments. This ruthless focus on the cover-up enabled the Umbrella Corporation to drag out the subsequent legal proceedings for years, leveraging the lack of forensic evidence to minimize their culpability until a final, decisive action was taken against them. Part 24. Raccoon City's Nuclear Sterilization. In October 1st, 1998, the irreversible culmination of the Arklay outbreak and the resulting Raccoon City catastrophe arrived on October 1st, 1998. After weeks of uncontrolled viral spread, the complete collapse of all municipal authority, and the undeniable exposure of the Umbrella Corporation's involvement in a biological weapons crisis, the United States federal government was left with a single, brutal, and strategically necessary option: Operation Clean House. This mission, often referred to by the code name Mission Code XX, authorized the decisive final action to eliminate the uncontained biological threat permanently. The threat posed by the T-virus and the G-virus had evolved far beyond a local quarantine problem. The airborne strains of the T-virus and the highly mutable, unpredictable nature of the G-virus represented an existential threat to the entire North American continent, and potentially the world. With the Umbrella Corporation's internal cleanup efforts having failed to contain the outbreak and actively working to destroy evidence, the government concluded that conventional military containment was impossible. The only way to guarantee the eradication of the viral contamination and to prevent its spread to major population centers was through complete sterilization of the city's entire footprint. The authorized action was a nuclear missile strike, or alternatively, a conventional aerial bombing of such overwhelming force that it achieved the same result. The resulting explosion completely sterilized Raccoon City, wiping it off the map in a blinding flash of destruction. The city, which had been a quiet hub of Midwestern life only months before, was utterly obliterated, leaving behind a massive radioactive crater. This final, decisive action was the government's desperate attempt to contain the biological terror unleashed by Oswell Spencer's decades-long eugenics project. The missile strike achieved its immediate biological goal. The T-virus and G-virus were eliminated within the city limits. along with the millions of tons of biological evidence and, tragically, the few remaining civilian survivors. However, the sterilization was also a profound strategic victory for the Umbrella Corporation. By destroying the entire city, the government inadvertently buried the vast majority of the evidence and casualties of Umbrella's crimes. The destruction complicated any potential future investigation by eliminating key forensic evidence, crucial corporate documents, and, most importantly, the physical bodies of those who had succumbed to the virus. This lack of material evidence immediately played into Umbrella's hands. The corporation, leveraging its political connections and massive financial resources, was able to drag out the subsequent legal proceedings for years, arguing over the causality of the outbreak and minimizing their direct culpability. They attempted to frame the entire event as a tragic, isolated laboratory accident, followed by an extreme government overreaction. The nuclear sterilization of Raccoon City was not the end of the Umbrella Corporation, but a crucial turning point that allowed the organization to survive the immediate aftermath of the scandal, ensuring that the final, decisive prosecution of the company would require years of painstaking global investigation, fueled by the testimony of the handful of survivors, such as Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, who had escaped the burning city just hours before the strike. Part 25. Global Fallout and Umbrella's Legal Collapse, spanning from 1999 to 2004. Despite the decisive, destructive attempt by the United States government to bury the evidence with the nuclear sterilization of Raccoon City, the Umbrella Corporation's complete legal and financial collapse was inevitable. The final chapter of the original, nefarious Red Umbrella Corporation played out not in a laboratory, but in global courtrooms and political arenas, spanning the years from 1999 to 2004. The destruction of Raccoon City marked the beginning of the end, but the final verdict required years of painstaking investigation and the cumulative weight of numerous subsequent incidents to finally bring down Oswell Spencer's creation. The catastrophe in Raccoon City instantly exposed the Umbrella Corporation as a manufacturer of highly lethal biological weapons, triggering immediate global scrutiny. Though the Raccoon City evidence was destroyed, several other major BOW incidents occurred globally in the following years that provided the necessary, undeniable proof of Umbrella's continued illegal activities. These included the outbreaks on Rockford Island, the subsequent disaster at the Antarctic base, and the viral contamination of the Spencer Rain cruise ship. Each of these events, fueled by various Umbrella viral strains like the T-Virus and T-Veronica, created new casualties and provided crucial, uncontaminated samples and documents that bypassed the destruction of Raccoon City. The most critical factor in the corporation's downfall was the testimony of key figures. Survivors of the Mansion incident and the Raccoon City disaster, such as Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Leon S. Kennedy, and Claire Redfield, dedicated their lives to providing detailed, irrefutable evidence of Umbrella's crimes, including the names of the founders, the location of the labs, and the nature of the BOW research. Their testimony, combined with internal documents that were recovered or leaked, provided the foundational structure for the impending legal battle. The culmination of these global incidents, years of intensive investigations by international law enforcement agencies, sustained political pressure from the United States and European nations, and continuous media leaks finally generated enough momentum to overcome Umbrella's vast financial and political defenses. The company attempted to leverage its network of lobbyists and lawyers to deny responsibility, but the evidence was simply too overwhelming and too widespread to contain. The entire process led to a massive, consolidated lawsuit filed by the United States government and numerous international bodies. The lawsuit reached its inevitable conclusion in 2004, faced with insurmountable evidence of corporate negligence, criminal malfeasance, illegal human experimentation, and the proven deployment of biological weapons that caused a catastrophic loss of life. The original Red Umbrella Corporation was forced to declare bankruptcy and dissolve permanently. The ruling was a landmark decision that essentially dismantled the entire corporate entity, seizing all remaining assets, facilities, and most crucially, all of its proprietary T-Virus and G-Virus research data. The legal collapse of the Umbrella Corporation marked the formal end of Oswell Spencer's dream of ruling the world through eugenics. But the science and the viruses they unleashed proved far more durable than the corporate structure itself. Part 26. Spencer in Exile and Wesker's Global Manipulation. The official dissolution of the Umbrella Corporation in 2004 was not the end of its core architects, but merely a shift in the methods of their operation. The two main surviving figures of the original conspiracy, Oswell Spencer and Albert Wesker, both entered new phases of power, one hiding in exile and the other beginning his ambitious plan of global manipulation. Their continued existence ensured that the philosophy and the science of the progenitor virus would remain a terrifying, active threat to the world. Oswell Spencer, the undisputed mastermind and founder of the entire operation, disappeared almost immediately after the legal collapse. Despite the dissolution of his company and the global manhunt, Spencer's immense inherited wealth and his deep network of loyalists provided him with the necessary resources for a life of complete exile. He spent the years following the legal collapse hidden in a highly secured location, protected by his immense fortune and the final, absolute loyalty of his most trusted and genetically enhanced enforcer, Sergei Vladimir. Spencer continued to pursue his core ideological goal, the achievement of the Übermensch ideal, from the shadows, protected by the very corporate structure he had perfected. Though the company was gone, his vision remained alive, waiting for the final opportunity to manifest. Meanwhile, Albert Wesker's plan, which had begun with his betrayal at the Spencer mansion in 1998, entered its final, most dangerous phase. Wesker had successfully survived his confrontation with the T-02 tyrant and the destruction of the Arklay labs, emerging with his enhanced abilities from Project W intact. He had also successfully stolen a vast amount of Umbrella's scientific data, including the proprietary research on the T-Virus, the G-Virus, and the original progenitor strains. Using his superhuman intelligence, his unparalleled knowledge of the corporation's secrets, and his ruthlessness, Wesker did not go into hiding. Instead, he began to actively build alliances, infiltrate new global organizations, and gain access to vast resources, positioning himself as a shadow power capable of orchestrating global events. Wesker utilized his stolen data to finance and facilitate multiple contained bioterror events around the world. These acts were not random. They were calculated maneuvers designed to achieve two primary goals. First, to further gather BOW samples and new viral strains from the resulting chaos, adding to his own arsenal of biological knowledge. And second, to undermine global stability, creating the necessary chaos that would allow his own eugenics plan to flourish. Wesker's ultimate agenda was no longer merely to serve Spencer, but to replace him, utilizing the immense power of the progenitor virus and its derivatives, including the development of his own final apocalyptic strain, the Ouroboros virus, to force the next stage of human evolution on a global scale. Wesker, the creation of Project W, became the ultimate antagonist for the next era of the franchise, a living weapon of biological terror who controlled the very science that had destroyed his former employer, ensuring that the dark legacy of the Umbrella Corporation would continue to plague the world. Part 27. Tricell, Neo-Umbrella, and Ouroboros. Spanning 2007 to 2013. The formal legal collapse of the original Umbrella Corporation in 2004 did not sanitize the world of biological weapons. It simply fragmented the science and the ambition among new entities. The period from approximately 2007 to 2013 saw the legacy of Oswell Spencer and the Progenitor virus survive through a complex web of new corporations, extremist groups, and terrorist organizations, all attempting to replicate the power and profit of the former pharmaceutical giant. This phase highlighted the devastating fact that the dangerous science unleashed by Umbrella was now globalized and could not be easily contained or destroyed by a court order. The most critical successor organization to Umbrella's black market operations was Tricell, Incorporated. Tricell was a massive, legitimate global conglomerate that operated in areas ranging from natural resource extraction to pharmaceutical manufacturing. However, one of Tricell's 3 primary divisions was secretly infiltrated and manipulated by Albert Wesker. Tricell became the primary, covert financier and logistical supporter for Wesker's ultimate, final plan. It provided him with the necessary funding, labs, and political cover to carry out the research and development of his final, apocalyptic, viral strain, the Ouroboros virus. The Ouroboros virus was Wesker's crowning scientific achievement, a strain derived from the original Progenitor virus, but heavily engineered with the addition of the T-Veronica and other viral components. Unlike the T-virus, which creates zombies, or the G-virus, which causes uncontrolled mutation, the Ouroboros virus was designed for mass infection with a specific, ruthless biological filter. The virus would either be absorbed by a host with the necessary latent genetic superiority, turning them into Wesker's desired Übermensch, or it would simply reject the host, rapidly consuming the inferior body and transforming it into a writhing mass of black biological matter, spreading the infection to others. Wesker intended to infect the entire world, forcing a final, catastrophic evolutionary culling that would leave only the genetically superior to rule a new world. A terrifying realization of Oswell Spencer's decades-old eugenics dream. The pervasive influence of Umbrella's science also led to the rise of other groups, such as the terrorist organization known as Neo-Umbrella, founded and led by Carla Radames. These groups mimicked the structure and research methods of the original corporation, developing and deploying new viral strains, such as the C virus, which combined the bestial mutation of the T-virus with the reproductive qualities of the G-virus. This continuous proliferation of new, lethal BOWs and the rise of politically motivated bioterrorism led to a world saturated with biological threats. The original legal collapse had simply decentralized the terror, proving that the true legacy of the Umbrella Corporation was not its corporate logo, but the Progenitor virus itself, which had irrevocably corrupted global science and ensured that the fight against biological weapons would continue indefinitely. Part 28. Blue Umbrella and the Modern Bioterror Era. The finale. The final chapter in the legacy of the infamous biological weapons creator, the Umbrella Corporation, introduces a profound, morally complex question. Can a symbol of absolute corporate evil ever achieve redemption? Years after the original, malicious Red Umbrella Corporation was legally dissolved in 2004, a new private military and security company emerged, adopting the same recognizable corporate logo, but with one stark difference: its coloring. This entity, known officially as Umbrella Co., or colloquially as Blue Umbrella, operates not to create weapons, but to contain and eliminate the threats left behind by its predecessor. The creation of Blue Umbrella was an attempt by former ethical employees and scientists of the original company to finally atone for the corporation's catastrophic crimes. These individuals, who were often lower-level staff, or those who were genuinely unaware of the clandestine BOW programs, banded together with the goal of turning the symbol of terror into a symbol of cleanup and security. They repurposed the corporate structure, the logistical assets, and the immense knowledge base of the original company, but dedicated the entire operation to fighting the effects of global bioterrorism. Crucially, Blue Umbrella works in close cooperation with the world's leading anti-bioterrorism agency, the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, or BSAA, which itself was founded by former STARS members like Chris Redfield. Blue Umbrella serves as a highly specialized private contractor, utilizing its knowledge of the T-Virus, G-Virus, and Progenitor lineage to assist the BSAA and other international organizations in the containment and cleanup of the persistent BOW threats that continue to emerge globally. This cooperation represents a dramatic, complete ideological shift from the original company's mission of eugenics and destruction. However, the very existence of Blue Umbrella raises the ultimate, defining question for the modern era of the franchise. Is this a genuine, altruistic redemption arc for the infamous name? A true attempt by former employees to make amends for the sins of Oswell Spencer and William Birkin? Or is the seemingly benevolent Blue Umbrella simply another profound, sophisticated manipulation by remaining executives who still cling to the core, nefarious ambitions of the original corporation? The organization possesses the full DNA and history of the most dangerous company in the world, and its access to advanced technology, military training, and viral knowledge is unparalleled. As the world continues to be plagued by new viral outbreaks and the constant threat of BOWs developed by Wesker's successors and other terrorist groups, the presence of Blue Umbrella represents the complex, moral grey zone of the modern bioterror era. The corporation is the ultimate embodiment of its own legacy. The original Red Umbrella may be gone, but the immense destructive power of the science it unleashed, and the questions of morality and control it created, will continue to define the entire world forever. This final metamorphosis leaves the narrative open-ended, confirming that the fight against the progenitor virus and the ambition it represents is a perpetual, unending war, making the story of the Umbrella Corporation a timeless saga of science, ambition, and irreversible human error.